Hello there, and welcome to another episode of Cutting Through the Bullshit. I am your host, Dr. Stephanie Snyder, and I am a high performance mentor. Through my unique blend of strategy, mindset, and intuition, I help men and women to cut through the BS in order to create the life and business they desire. This topic is going to be fun. Last episode, I started to open up kind of Pandora's box here. I just kind of snuck it in at the end of that last episode. So if you didn't listen, head back, take a listen. It will lead into this one. So I had mentioned the idea of failing, right? That we don't get it right the first time, really ever, right? Like we just don't. And the problem is, as we get older, we think that we're supposed to get it right the first time. We think that because we're older, we're not going to fail at something new. And part of that is, one, we're afraid of failing. So we're like, well, we're going to do this thing and it's going to just be fine, right? The other part of that is that we're honestly just not being honest with ourselves, right? And that was kind of redundant. But when it comes to doing something new, trying something new, changing something, it can feel scary. I know, because you're unsure of it all. You're not positive it's going to work out. You're not sure if it's worth the effort. And so sometimes we don't ever actually make the changes because we have all these doubts that creep in. And I was listening to a podcast, I think. No, I went when I was at church on last Sunday. And the pastor said something in passing about, have you ever watched a kid try something? And it immediately sparked this idea. And I was like, the childlike mind, right? Not the childlike mind as in like super immature and follows emotions only, right? Like we want to be able to tap into our childlike mind from time to time. We don't want it to rule our lives though. And so what do I mean by this? This is where I mention that I do experiments. And the reason I do experiments is because it's a game and it's fun. And when it's a fun and it's a game, you don't get stressed about it. You're like, okay, I got it wrong. Okay, try again, right? When kids try things, and I am blessed to be able to see this through the eyes of my children, when they try something and they get it wrong the first time, oftentimes, now sometimes they do, oftentimes they don't beat themselves up. They're like, oh, all right, that way didn't work. Let me try a different way. Oh, okay, that way didn't work. Let me try a different way. They have this persistence because they're like, no, I'm going to do this thing. I don't care how many times it doesn't work. And quite frankly, they don't even see it as a failure. They just see it as a way it didn't work. And they're like, oh, okay, right? Like you have to have engaged with a toddler who was super curious and got into the things that they weren't supposed to get into. And you were like, how the heck did you get into that thing? Well, they got into it because they wanted to, and failure wasn't an option, right? They're like, I know that the chocolate chips sit on the counter, and so while mom's in the bathroom, I'm going to go figure out how to get to the chocolate chips. And there's no fear. They don't care that they have 7 chairs stacked up, right? Like I've watched my youngest do this. My father has built these little chairs for each one of the kids that they really only fit into until they were like 3 years old, and then they outgrew it. But we have them in the girls' bathroom, and I have walked in on my youngest with all of those chairs stacked up on top of pillows, on top of other things, because she was so determined to get something on a shelf that she couldn't reach, and she didn't want to ask for help. The determination of a child when they want something is an incredible force. And somehow we miss that along the way. When we go into adulthood, we think, well, we don't need that determination. That's a childish way. It's not. It's not. If you focus on something as much as a child focuses on something, you're going to create it. It's going to happen. Because those little buggers don't quit until they've gotten the thing that they want. How many times has your kid asked you the same question until you've broken down and said yes? A lot, right? A lot. It has to come to the point where I will look at my kids and look and tell them, I am not changing my answer. Do not ask again. And 5 minutes later, they ask again, right? There is an incredible determination of children. And we lose that as adults because when we hear no so often, whether it was from your own parents or whether it was from, your peers or, people that you work with, when you are told no so often, you stop asking. Kids don't care. You can tell them no a bajillion times and they're still going to ask you the same question because they want something. How incredible would it be if you had that power behind you? Right? So dip back into that energy. What was it like to want something? And here's another little caveat here. I remember I was talking to a client one time and I had asked her, what do you want your income level to be? And she said $10,000 at the time. That was $10,000. Now everybody wants a $20,000 a month, right? Like whatever it was. She wanted a $10,000 a month. And I said, okay, cool. I said, why? Oh, to pay off debt. And you just saw her, like, her whole body shifted and her tone changed. And I said, no, you don't. She said, what do you mean? I said, you don't want that money to pay off debt. I said, you might pay off debt with it, but what do you really want that money for? She was like, oh, no, if I pay off the debt, she was trying to convince herself of this, right? To do the adult thing and to pay off the debt. And I was like, you're not motivated by that. We're not motivated by that. It has to be fun and a game or something that we want, right? That's what motivates us. Because really, there's an inner child in all of us who really just wants to have fun. And we go into adulthood and we're like, no, we can't do that. Or we let our child run the show at the wrong times. Right? Where you're in the conversation with a partner and the partner says something and all of a sudden your inner child comes out and you lose your mind, right? Like, that's not helpful. But our inner child is powerful and we want to make sure that we tap into that fun, that joy, that excitement for the thing that we want, because children don't know failure. They don't know what that means. All they know is a way that it didn't work. And they try again because they want the thing. And so when it comes to the thing that you want, yes, maybe my client did want the 10K months. She absolutely did. But she wanted it really because she wanted to have more fun. She wanted to have more money so that she wasn't worried about the bills being paid and she could say, you know what, kids, let's go out for ice cream tonight. Or, you know what, we have enough money, let's go out to eat instead of mom making a meal. That's really why we want more money. And it's okay. It's okay. I think that you should have the money to do the things that you want to do. And I'm not going to get into my adult is trying to come through and be like, no, Stephanie, we want to talk about responsibility with money. No, we don't. This is a fun episode right now. We're going to talk about, that's going to be a conversation for another day, how you can be responsible and have fun at the same time. We're going to have that conversation on another episode. I keep leading you into all these episodes. You're just going to binge listen and it's going to be great. So when it comes to this childlike mind, it serves you when you're changing something. Because if you are so afraid to make a mistake that you don't ever actually try, you've already failed. And so how can you look at it from a child perspective? How can you just test it and see? Hey, maybe this will work. Maybe this won't work. And by the way, this is actually how you learn to collapse time. I am going to throw that in there for you right now. I was going to do a separate episode on it, but I'm going to throw it in. Okay, so Collapsing time. We hear this, collapsing time. Especially in my realm, I work with a lot of spiritual entrepreneurs, and there's this idea of collapsing time, right? The goal to collapse time. I just want to collapse time so that the thing that I want happens faster. And how do you actually collapse time? Well, it's not some pie in the sky kind of an idea that only a few people have access to, right? Collapsing time in the educational world is simply doing the task faster. So what does that mean? I'm going to tell you. So the first time that you learned to tie your shoes, how long did it take you? Probably the whole day, and it probably wasn't very good. Your shoe probably came untied very quickly after that, right? How long did it take you to run your first mile? Probably a long time. And it probably didn't feel good. But as you did it more frequently, you got better and better and better at it, and it took you less and less time, thus collapsing time. So it went from a whole day to being able to tie your shoe to doing it in less than 30 seconds. That's collapsing time. You learned a better way to do it, a more efficient way to do it. You mastered the skill. And so you collapsed time because it no longer took you that long. It took you a matter of seconds. It didn't take you a day to tie your shoe anymore. It took you seconds to tie your shoe. That is collapsing time in its most basic definition. And so when people talk about collapsing time, there's going to be a learning curve, as there is with anything that you learn as a child, right? There's a learning curve where you are going to figure out, okay, what works, what doesn't work, how can I do this differently? And at the beginning, it's going to take you a little bit longer. But as you move through it, you're going to collapse time. It's going to take you seconds compared to hours, right? Or minutes compared to hours, right? When you started to read, it took you a really long time to read your first Dr. Seuss book. Now you probably have it memorized, right? Fox on Socks and Knox and Box, right? That's collapsing time. Because it becomes a habit, it becomes part of who you are, that you no longer have to think about it. It just is. And that's what happens when it's collapsing time between your first client and your 10th client, right? They come through faster because you figured out what works. There will always be a learning curve at the beginning. But if you approach it with a childlike mind, it's not so scary. It can actually be quite fun. How can you make it a game? How can you enjoy it a bit more? Because then it doesn't actually feel like work. You're like, oh, hey, let me see how will this work faster? Is this a better way to do this? And be open to the way that other people do things, because my guess is they're a whole lot faster at something than you are. Right? My girlfriend came over and made sourdough bread with me over the weekend. And she's made it a whole bunch of times. She's mastered it, right? She's good at it. I was like, wait a second, we're doing what? Right? There's a learning curve. But I was excited about learning something new. And so I was open to learning the way that she did it. And I bet if I asked somebody else about how they made their sourdough, they'd have a different way. And it might be faster, might be slower. Who knows? But you can't get this wrong. You're not going to be showing up at the pearly gates and God's like, sorry, you screwed it up. Right? Like, that's not going to happen. So you can learn from the failures, can learn a better way. And it's so less stressful if you're like, you know what? That's okay. I didn't know how to do it. Now I have a better way of doing it. Right? The first time I did my listed, whatever, I can't even say the word now. The first time I posted a podcast episode, I guarantee you it took me at least an hour and a half to figure the whole thing out. And now I have the system down where I can post a new episode after I've recorded it, probably within 5 minutes. But it used to take me hours to do this. Where there's a will, there's a way, right? So think of that kid who's like, you know what? Go back to your inner childhood and you're like, I want this thing so bad. I don't care what I have to do to get there. I don't care how many people tell me no. I don't care how many chairs I have to stack up on top of pillows to reach the top shelf, right? Enjoy the process. Because that's where the joy really is. It's not in the thing that you get. It's in the process of getting there, right? Like I can imagine, I didn't have a video of this, but I can imagine my daughter as she was stacking all these things where she was like, oh, okay, I've got the pillows. Okay, now what can I use? What can I use? Oh, a chair. I'm going to go get the chairs. I'm going to go get all the chairs. I'm going to stack them because they stack really well. And then I'm just going to hold on to the wall while I do this, right? Like I'm imagining that. And so it's okay for your child, your inner child, to come out and to play once in a while. Once a day is also acceptable, right? So to recap here, 1, figure out what it is that you really want, not the adult responsible thing where it's like, I need to have a 401k investment, although that's can be really fun, right? Like, but to get out of bed, have some joy getting out of bed. What is the thing that you're excited for today? Focus on that. And then focus on more of the exciting things, right? So find out what you want. Make it a game or an experiment, whatever term works best for you. And let the failures just be lessons on how it didn't work. And that's it. So I'm sending you so much love. I hope you enjoyed this episode. And as always, be you, because the world needs more of you. Bye.